Bonjour tout le monde. All right, so we already talked about previously or had a lesson previously on spell change ER verbs. All right, so this is just going to be a review and we're going to have some exercises to work with when we do our review, and then we'll have a little review quiz because a lot of people seem to struggle with this one when we did the test way back in first quarter. Okay, and I just want everybody to be on the same page moving forward into when we start doing new stuff. Okay, so spell change verbs. All right, we got some patterns that we're going to learn about. So first, let's start with the verb acheter. All right, and this verb means to buy. All right. And the thing about spell change verbs is that there's either an accent mark that's going to change, or there is an accent mark that's going to appear, or a letter is going to become another letter, okay? But the thing that remains the same amongst these verbs is that they're still conjugated like regular verbs. So first, let's just go back and talk about regular verbs and what the endings are. So let's put this one on hold actually for a second. And we're going to talk about the verb parler, okay? Parler is a regular verb, okay? And you guys may be very familiar with verbs, and a lot of you guys showed that on the test. You knew how to conjugate them, you just didn't know which ones were the spell change verbs, and that is okay. All right, so I made a squished little version here, but for the verb parler, remember regular verbs, we cut off the ending and then we add different things based on the person that we're talking about, the subject that we're talking about, okay? In the case of je, all we have to add to the end of it is an E, okay? Tu, we add ES. Il, we add an E, so the je form and the il form are gonna look the same. Nous, we add ONS. Vous, we add EZ. And il plural, we add ENT, okay? So this should jog your memory. So even though the spell change verbs are going to have an accent mark change or a letter change or something like that, they're still going to have these same endings that we're used to, okay? So it should be relatively easy to conjugate them at least, and then decide where the accent mark or the spell change happens in the verb, okay? So first, we're going to start with the verb acheter. Okay, so let's just go ahead and conjugate acheter as if it was a regular verb. Okay, so I've underlined our endings, so you can see that our endings are exactly the same as a regular verb, EES, E, ONS, EZ, ENT, okay? So we're starting there. Now, for acheter, the spell change happens with an accent mark that is added in certain forms. Not all of the forms, just some of the forms, all right? So for the je form, we add an accent grave. Accent grave. Remember, we differentiate our accents depending on the kind of sound that is being made here. So remember, an accent aigu, the one that's pointing upwards, makes the A sound. So we've seen, you maybe remember this word, présent, présent. So you can hear it. It makes the A sound. In this case, an accent grave is kind of a downward sound, so it's j'achète. You see your jaw kind of drops down a little bit, j'achète. It's kind of a sound when you add that accent on there, okay? So tu achètes, all right, we have another accent grave. And remember, accent grave, it's spelled exactly like that, like a grave. So it's pointing towards the grave. It's pointing downward. All right, so that might be a way to help you remember it a little bit. All right, il achète and ils achètent. Okay, so just like with our regular ER verbs, also the je, tu, il, and il plural forms are all pronounced the same. J'achète, tu achètes, il achète, ils achètent. Okay, you do pronounce this S because of the A at the beginning. The vowel does make that S pronounced. Ils achètent. It's like a Z sound, but pronunciation is still the same with the verb despite the different endings. Okay. Now, you may have noticed I only added accent marks to the je, tu, il, and il plural forms. In fact, let me go ahead and get a different color marker, just to make that pop a little bit more. You can't see it as much on the video. So I have the accent mark here, 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 and here. And you'll notice I didn't put any accent marks here. So the spell change pattern, whether it's an accent mark change, a letter change, whatever it is, happens in the je, tu, il, and il plural forms, but doesn't happen in the nu or the vous form. And that's the same for all of the verbs that we're going to learn today. The je, tu, il, and il plural forms are the only forms that are going to change. Nu and vous are going to stay like the infinitive. So the infinitive, if it has an accent mark, have the accent mark in the same place for the nu and vous. If it doesn't have an accent mark, the nu and the vous aren't going to have an accent mark. If it has a different letter, if you change a letter in the je, tu, il, and il plural form, but you don't have that letter change in the infinitive, you're not going to change the letter in the nu and the vous form. And that one sounds a little bit silly. We're going to talk about that when we get to that spell change one, okay? But in this case, for acheter, then you have only an accent grave in the je, tu, il, and il plural forms. And in your book, on page 208 and 209, you have some charts on how these verbs are conjugated and also some other verbs that are conjugated like this one. Okay, so in this case, the verb acheter only has two verbs that it's teaching you that are conjugated like this, amener and emmener, okay? And those do sound very similar and they have very similar meanings, okay? But if you want to refresh your memory on those meanings, go ahead and see those pages in your book, 208 and 209, and that should help you with some verbs that are conjugated like this. So when it says it's conjugated like this, it has the same accent added on the same E in the je, tu, il, and il plural forms alone. All right, so that's one pattern that we're learning today. We're going to learn three. All right, now go ahead and get rid of that too. Nothing distracting here. The next pattern that we're going to learn is with the verb espérer. The verb espérer, you might remember, means to hope. All right. So when you say, I hope for good weather, j'espère pour le bon temps. All right. So again, these are regular ER verbs in terms of the ending. So let's just go ahead and conjugate these verbs like regular ER verbs. Great. So again, I reiterate the fact that the endings are all the same as we are used to with our ER verbs, okay? We have E, ESE, ONS, EZ, ENT. Nothing changed, nothing crazy just yet. All right, you'll notice that espérer has an accent aigu. And actually, now that I think about it, I should have left this up here. All right, so when it's pointing up, it's an accent aigu. If it's pointing down, it's an accent grave. All right, so we have this accent aigu. Remember, accent aigu makes the A sound. Présente. Okay? We hear it here too. Espérer. Okay? But when we get into the conjugated forms, j'espère, we don't hear that A sound anymore. Okay? So what accent do we think that we need? J'espère. We have our jaw drop again. It's going down. We need an accent grave over the middle E. Okay? So just like with acheter, where it went on the middle E, it didn't go on the ending, it goes in the middle. Okay, so make sure that you don't put it over the wrong E. Okay, so again, just like with acheter, we have je, tu, il, and il plural, where I just added those accent marks. Because if you listen to the pronunciation, you can hear it. We don't have this A sound anymore with the accent aigu. We have a downward moving sound, an eh sound in these verbs. J'espère, tu espères, il espère, ils espèrent. Okay, so remember, all of these are pronounced the same and they all have the accent mark. Okay, again, notice the nu and the vu, we didn't add an accent mark. Okay, remember, the nu and the vu end up being just like the infinitive. So what does the infinitive have? It has an accent aigu. So we are still going to add an accent. We're just going to keep the same accent that it had originally. All right, so we have these accent marks going down, accent grave. All right, je, tu, il, and il plural, they're going down, accent grave, espère. And nous and vous, we can kind of hear it a little bit. It's in the middle, so it's not a stressed syllable, but espérons, espérer, espérons, espérer. So I did exaggerate it a little bit for the pronunciation so that you could hear it. Okay, but you can hear where that accent mark goes. Espérons, espérer. You hear that A sound with the accent aigu. All right, and again, on page 209, you have some other verbs that are conjugated like this. You have actually quite a few. Célébrer, considérer, posséder, préférer, protéger, and répéter. The thing that gets a little confusing is when you have two accent marks in your verb. So let's go ahead and talk about one of these verbs conjugated like espérer. So it's going to follow the same pattern, but it has two E's with accents on it. Okay, so I don't want you to get confused which accent you need to put your accent grave on. All right, so the verb préférer, you guys might have seen that one before. You might be able to tell because it is a cognate that it means to prefer. So remember, cognates are words that look like English and have the same definition as English, okay? So again, just like we've done with all of the other ones, we're just going to conjugate it like a regular ER verb. We're not even going to worry about our accent marks to start out with. right, so first we just conjugated like a regular ER verb. Again, all of our endings are the same as regular ER verbs that we've learned about before. Easy peasy, okay? Now, the thing we need to deal with is our accent marks, okay? So let's go ahead and start out, instead of starting out with our je form like we have with all the other ones, let's go ahead and start out with our nous and our vous form, because we already know, based on the other ones, that it's got to follow the same as our infinitive, okay? So our infinitive has 2 accents aigus, so we know that our nous and our vous form have to both be accents aigus, all right? So we don't have any changes here. And again, if you pronounce it properly, you can hear it in the pronunciation. Nous préférons. Okay, you hear that A sound. Préférons. Préférer. Okay, again, you hear the A sound when you're pronouncing both of these. But when I say je préfère, okay, do we hear an A sound? Here's where it gets tricky, and this is why I wanted to talk about this one. Since we have 2 accent marks, only one of them is going to change based on the pattern that we have learned so far, okay? So actually, if you listen carefully, je préfère. So where's my A sound? My A sound is on the first E. So that one is going to stay an accent aigu, just like the infinitive, okay? Préfère, okay? But then the second one drops down. So we need an accent grave, just like when we conjugated espérer, and just like when we conjugated acheter. Okay, so it's going to be the second E for these ones that have 2 accents. It's going to be the second E that's going to get the accent mark. Okay, and some people in class have said that this looks like a little house. So some of them have called these house verbs. Okay, so we might talk about it like a little house, like the peak of a little house. Okay, we don't have that in the nous and the vous form. In the nous and the vous form, the pointing upwards. But in the je, tu, il, and il plural form, we have them like a little house. Okay, one pointing up, one pointing down. Préfère, 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 préfère. And again, I'm exaggerating the pronunciation so you can hear exactly where those accent marks are going to go. Okay, of course, this is préfère, 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 but I'm just exaggerating the pronunciation for you so you can hear where those accent marks go. Okay, but again, we have our spell change just in the je, tu, il, and il plural forms. In the nous and the vous, we have our same accent marks just like the infinitive. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about the last spell change pattern that we need to be concerned with. And for this last spell change pattern, we're dealing with a literal spell change where a letter is going to change. So rather than an accent mark change, we're going to have a letter change. So unfortunately, we cannot do what we did before where we have the verb conjugated out properly and then just add our accent mark. So this one is probably the most complicated to remember how to do or to conjugate out. Okay, so let's work with the verb envoyer. Of course, the verb envoyer means to send, okay? And we have this little Y here in the middle of the verb. That is going to be the thing that changes, okay? And it's strictly for pronunciation purposes that it changes. So we're going to see this change again in the je, tu, il, and il plural forms. The nous and the vous are going to stay like our infinitive, okay? So I'm actually going to do this. This is going to be a little complicated because I want to make a point here. All right. So again, I'm not sure how well the color coding works for you guys online, but this Y is going to change to an I, and that is the spell change pattern for these ones that have a Y in them. So, j'envoie, tu envoies, il envoie, ils envoient. Again, we have the same pronunciation for all of these, and this Y becomes an I only in the je, tu, il, and il plural forms. Okay, so that's the only change that's going to happen here. Again, we still have our same endings, okay, that we're accustomed to: e, es, ons, ez, ent, but we have this little spell change issue to deal with. And since envoyer starts with a vowel, remember you need J apostrophe for things that start with a vowel, just like j'aime, l'étudiant, stuff like that. Remember, we have that little contraction that happens. Okay, but in the nous and the vous form, as always, we keep the same thing that the infinitive has. So if the infinitive has an accent mark, we keep the accent mark. If it doesn't have an accent mark, it doesn't have an accent mark in the nous and the vous form. If it has a certain letter, we keep that letter in the nous and the vous form only. Only the nous and the vous form, okay? So we kept our Y here, envoyons, envoyer, but in the je, tu, il, and il plural forms, it changes to an I. So make sure that you're aware of those ones. So some verbs that have a Y in them that follow this pattern: payer, employer, essayer, that's a very important one. You'll probably use that one quite a bit. Nettoyer, to clean. Okay, again, on pages 208 and 209 of your online textbook, it has the complete list. There's about 15 verbs in total that are these spell change ER verbs. And again, we'll be having a little review quiz. So I'll upload some exercises to help you guys practice, and then we will be having a little quiz just to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And again, everybody really struggled with this concept when we did the test way back in first quarter. So I want to make sure everybody's on the same page before moving forward. All right, au revoir.